My guest today is Adam Vincenzini from adamvincenzini.com, Melbourne-based blogger, social media guru, content man, video guy. Adam, how are you? Where are you at the moment?
Hey Trev, I'm on a balcony in Broadbeach and the sun's shining down on me, so life's pretty good.
Mate, you're looking very relaxed, Broadbeach being on the Gold Coast, and so
I feel very
I hope you don't get a sunburn while we do this.
That's why I'm wearing my hat, because I've got the same hairstyle as you. So I thought I better wear my hat. I better wear my hat for this one.
The same barber. That barber gets a lot of work.
Right.
That barber, mate. On your blog, adamvincenzini.com, which I've been reading for quite some time now, particularly when we got together when you were working in England at a company called Paratus Communications. But you're always bringing out these blog posts, I find, that spark my thinking at a particular point in time. And you had one the other day, and it was, let me just get the exact title of it to make sure I got it right, the 7 different types of social media consultants. And you know, you looked at the 7 different types of social media specialists that are out there today, and I think the timing is impeccable at the moment because, as we both know, a lot of companies now are thinking more strategically about this. I think gone are the days where they just get the intern in to do some Twitter stuff or to do Facebook. It's a little bit more strategic, and there's any number of different ways that they can go. And some of the roles that I've seen advertised of late are paying some pretty good coin. So I just thought today we'd riff on going through those 7 different types, and just have a chat about it. What do you reckon?
Yeah, sounds good. I guess the motivation for the post came out of probably similar to you, just having to think about, when you hire someone, when you put a job description together, or when you're looking at, the types of gigs going around, and often I get asked in client meetings, like, who should we have run stuff, or who should we have, as the point person on social. And I always say, look, it's a really tough one, because you kind of need a person that's in quite short supply. And I think the ones that are really good have an appreciation or a knowledge about 6 or 7 different disciplines. So I think you've probably got, and I think I talked through 7 of them. I think the first one's this sort of comms shaped or comms sort of background type social person. It's had someone who sort of had like a comms degree or worked in PR for a bit, or internal comms or whatever it might be, but really sort of understands, I guess, the psyche of third-party content. So when something's seen and how it gets pushed through the different phases of of that content sharing. So it's almost that long tail style sharing approach, but understanding that sometimes you may come up with a great idea, but that may upset someone, so maybe don't hit publish, and knowing when not to get too excited about, great ideas, and sort of being quite, I think, met with the approach you take. And I think that's a really good skill, and I think probably your comms shaped person has a better understanding of that more than most. And I think if you look at some of the others, like, you've got your more digitally sort of shaped or background style person, or your ad person, or you've got all these other ones, they probably don't think issues first. Now, I wouldn't always, you don't always want to just be totally blinded by issues. I think, I think it's a balance thing, but I think you do need to have a bit of an instinct or some sort of understanding that not everything has to grab someone's attention. You don't have to come up with an amazing bit of copy or an idea every time you participate. Sometimes just having a good, solid, and gradual day-to-day connection with an audience. So I think a lot of people in the advertising world, and again, I don't want to. All I'm trying to say is that, if you come from a campaigns background, so we want to be famous, and I think sometimes it's better to gradually build relationships over time as opposed to shocking something with someone big and then losing them again.
Yeah.
And I think there's just 2 different schools of thought. So I think that's the comms people. That's one of their benefits. I think potentially comms people haven't developed their technical skills or their understanding of the digital space probably as well as others. But again, it's really hard to generalise, because I know some people. I think you're a good example, and there's a lot of other people out there that have really evolved as the comms, I guess as media habits have evolved.
Yep.
And that takes a lot of personal investment as well. I think you don't get, there's a lot of times like, oh, we should do training, or how do we become better at this? It's the onus is on yourself, I think. And you really have to kind of decide, well, you know what, I'm going to put the time in because no one else is really going to teach me. And the only way to teach myself is to get really active and start to apply all the things I've learnt in life to how people are currently behaving online and in the broader sort of marketing and communication space.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. And I mean, I guess, you know, we're both PR backgrounds, so maybe a little bias will show.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I sort of started looking at the space in 2006 and then sort of moved more into it in '07. It was really looking at what the PR firms were doing overseas, particularly in America, because, you know, just to see where the trends were and what was going on and, well, what's this blogging thing? And then obviously social media came out of that. So I can safely say that in America, I believe that the PR industry was the first ones out and recognising it. And from that point of view, you've got you know, companies like Edelman and Shift Communications in the States that were doing it in a big way really early, and all the big agencies are all over it and have been for absolutely years. And I think that that's permeated throughout the industry globally. I think Australian PR people, you fall in a couple of camps. You got the you know, the sort of top 10, 20% that are really going for it and really learning. These are individuals and really putting out, and there's a lot of you know, there's a lot of good PR people, I think, that are out there learning and having a thought leadership position. And then you probably get those that have probably a little bit more of what you call old school and probably don't want to change their habits too much. So a comms person, if they want to change their habits or they're coming into it fresh and they haven't got any, I guess, any legacy from the old days, you know, they're in a really, really good position for all of those reasons that you talk about. I think, you know, the natural side of PR is that we've always done content. So if I look back when I first started in PR, sure, media publicity was a big thing, but gosh, I did a lot of newsletter content, just heaps of it, and also video, but the videos that I did were hideously expensive. And so we've always done that stuff. It's just that the barriers to entry have plummeted. So the telling of stories and the building of relationships, which is what, to me, social media is all about, that's what we've always done. I just feel the tools have now caught up with our industry. And if you're going into that space, then there are specialisms within it. So so that's the comms background, the PR people. Yeah. And we both feel that, you know, the right sort of person with that background goes well. Because they don't just look at digital also, they'll look at events, they'll look at media, they'll look at all of these elements. And I think from a holistic point of view, you know, there's some really good operators from a PR background. But there's some people in with a PR background who, you know, you wouldn't let them anywhere near it. Let's look at the second social media specialist area you had down, and that was the digital background. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so again, it sort of comes at the fact that, you know, when you look at digital, is still a relatively new thing. I know in the whole scheme of things, it's still, if you think about the way we've communicated for centuries, digital is still a relatively new thing. So you've got a development background, or whether that's, you know, you've got mainly development background, to be honest. It's people that produce digital solutions or build properties in a digital space. So I guess the thought on this one was, you know, with websites, when they became, you know, a big thing for companies 10 or 15 years ago, they were very static. They were static places. They were a place where you went and got information, that was it, okay? What very few companies did, but probably benefited from, was having things like a blog or having dynamic content, which encourage people to visit more often, okay? So you started to develop a relationship. It's something that you see a lot more now. I think someone with a digital background will push, because they'll predominantly push the solution or the way something looks or the experience that the user will have. Fit in the, I guess, in the new sort of social era that we're in, potentially is too much of a focus on the solution, but not actually what happens once people get there. So how something looks and how it feels, but what do they do with it? And again, I think that's where social's a bit of an interesting one. It's you want to get people there, but then what do they do once they get there, or how do they then continue on that journey? And is that digital person thinking about what the story does as opposed to what the experience does? And I guess that's where I was thinking on that one. But so many pros with that kind of person as well, like the ability to come up with solutions that your more traditional comms or marketing person probably wouldn't consider. I think that's a really big benefit, and I think that's why when you look at, and we'll get to it at the end, but I think almost the utopia or the prototype of the perfect social media consultant has little bits of everything. And I think having a knowledge of digital, what it can do, what it can't do, the time frames, like sometimes I've seen things or ideas come up in a meeting where, well, we'll build this app or we'll come up with this video, bit of content or whatever it might be. And without understanding the time frames or how long it takes to build something.
Technology involved.
Yeah, the technology involved is sometimes a massive barrier. And I think, you often get people going, oh, but I can build a website in 5 minutes on Tumblr. That's a Tumblr website which anyone can do. It's not a fully functioning bespoke website that has a booking mechanism and all these other bits that you may want. And I just think there's sometimes a lack of appreciation for the development time for that digital person.
And what sort of skill sets has this digital social media person got per se?
I would say, what are they probably good at? I reckon I think they're a bit more campaign driven from my experience. They're very good at taking like a campaign platform and really making that come to life. And you'll see a lot of those where you go to, take it on a most basic level. You go to a brand social presence and you can really feel how well coordinated their online presence is, like the branding, everything is really slick. And I think that's because they have an understanding of what assets work, especially with apps as well. I think those guys with the most beneficial or the best working app type extensions on those social profiles, especially on Facebook. I mean, Facebook's become mine the other day, and she said, look, if there wasn't Facebook apps, I wouldn't have a business. And I'm like, I completely get that, because that's often the only way you can bring a campaign to life or actually generate, all the metrics that, your CMOs really want to see. So entries, views, visits, all that kind of stuff. So I think they have a good appreciation for the development and the creation of those kind of things. But potentially not as, like I said, not as well-versed in that day-to-day or that, more generic storytelling, which is less ad message shaped, and it's more about understanding what the communities want and shaping your content based on what they want.
So if you're a social media specialist that came out of the digital realm, then going back to school and learning a bit on the comms side wouldn't do you any harm at all. No,
so I think that'd be great. And like I said, I think it does take time. I think we often take for granted the things we learn over the years. And one of the things that we talked about earlier before we started was, if you're a young person who's been given a social media remit, the one thing you don't often have is a bit of life experience. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I just think that the more you operate both in a professional and personal way in life and you pick up experience along the way, you become a bit more in tune and instinctive on how to deal with things in a very common sense kind of way.
Yeah.
And I think we often undervalue common sense in this space, because oftentimes that is normally the solution. Let's think about this, put our common sense hat on and we'll come up with something. And I think, for us, we've worked in the comm space for a long time. A lot of those things we see as common sense probably don't sort of come up with the red flag as common sense for a digital person, because that's just not the environment they've been in for 10 or 12, 15 years, whatever it might be. So I think a lot of it is exposure to things that your comms type person probably takes for granted, because you kind of think, well, that just makes sense, as opposed to...
Yeah. I think the other part of digital too is that we look at social media and we think about the technology and the channels and it's all digital, when it is technically, but really it's not. I mean, it's real life. It's, to me, an event, which, is what PR people deal with all the time, is just as much about social media and what you do with it. And so the danger with just being a digitally focused person is you just look about online. And I think the power of online is actually offline. So I think that's something that a digital person needs to be always aware of, is that there are, this is not a role just about online. Sure, that's where you operate, but the ramifications and everything else spill over everywhere else.
Yeah. The best analogy on that, Trev, and I reckon I'd probably use this in a meeting at least once a month, is and sort of the comparison between the online and offline. If you go to a dinner party, and there's 10 people at dinner party, right? And you get stuck sitting next to someone that spends their whole night talking about themselves, doesn't ask you any questions, basically is quite narcissistic in the way that they behave. By the end of the night, you're probably going to move away from them. Because if you're not going to ask me questions about me, if you're not going to take interest in me, I don't really just want to hear about your life. I'd quite like to have a conversation where you share your interests, your passions, the things that, the common ground or the shared interests that we have. Whereas you sit next to someone who's the opposite to that, who really does take a genuine interest in you or thinks about you as an audience and then sort of maybe shapes their conversation based on that, you tend to want to sit next to them or be near them for the evening. And I often think that's, kind of in a nutshell what social's about. It's often about finding some common ground and finding things of shared passions or interests that just play out online. And it's no different to the dinner party. It's just the fact there are these digital platforms that we use. And I think a lot of it is, bringing what you'd call acceptable behaviour or, kind of really what I'd call, good behaviour in the offline environment online.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't be different. But yeah, like you said, because of the technical side of things, because of the platforms, we often, I think, lose sight of what we're trying to do.
We do. So we're going to get more technical and look at the SEO.
Yes.
The social media specialist with SEO. That black art that it's not black art, or there's parts of it that are black art and parts that are not, and ever changing. Obviously, as Google keeps changing, what are your thoughts on the SEO specialist?
Well, and I think this is probably an area that most, I guess, if you look at the social specialists, I'd probably say 80% fall outside of this. So I think your SEO guys are often the most forgotten about, and often the guys who probably potentially maybe don't have a natural role or right to be a social person, which I think is, ludicrous, because I think there's a lot of things they do which are inherently social. And again, what's the definition of social? We could go on that for decades. But if you look at, there's lots of different aspects. So social search has obviously become a big thing. So, Google looks at not just your more traditional ranking elements. It looks at how many times someone's liked something or shared something or, all those different social actions. That has a big impact on how content ranks. So, and if you think about 80% of web sessions start with search, it's very hard for social not to be a big part of it.
To play a role, exactly.
And SEO guys, they are fantastic at making content more visible. And oftentimes, you have brands or you have businesses that go, why aren't I getting the traction I want online? It's because people don't know you exist, or people it's hard to cut through the noise because there's so many people trying to participate. And that's where someone with an SEO background or, that sort of search background can really add a lot of value, making your content more visible, making it work better, making things like blog posts rank better.
Correct.
A lot of people think, a blog isn't social. A blog's probably the most social form of content there is. You publish something, people comment, it gets shared around.
I call it the traditional social media.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, And I just think that those guys are often not thought about, and I think they probably think like a really important part of it, and they are. I think one of the issues that may come up with your sort of SEO-shaped type person is, like I said, there are some of that black hat style work that's done. So whether or not that's pinging what I would sometimes call quite badly worded blog posts purely for rank improvement or for sort of pingbacks from Google or wherever it might be. Sometimes you do get content for the sake of search engines as opposed to content for the sake of quality. And it's a big generalisation, but I think there's bits of that happen within SEO teams, and that's sometimes where I think the issues may arise, and that can have reputational impact. That can all these different types of things.
I'm a bit of a purist in that respect. You know, like if I've got a great heading that I think is just a gorgeous, great heading, and it's not SEO friendly, I'll probably go with that. But there's times when you need cornerstone content that you will have very obviously SEO-driven headlines. But I guess also it depends on your goals and whether being found online is, 90% of what you're trying to do. Whereas there's other people, it's more about thought leadership or, you know, building community and getting people sharing their stuff, etc. So it's a really fine line, isn't it, between both? And again, does it, you know, should the, and I think that they should. I think the prototype, as you say, for today needs to understand the basics of it and keywords and phrases, etc. But without overcooking it. And if they need to bring in an SEO person to look from a strategic perspective, then that's probably a really nice balance.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It really does come down to purpose. And I think one of the hard things when talking about the whole social space, it's so broad. It is such a broad thing. It's such an evolving thing. And oftentimes it's a lot easier to talk about how these people operate in a very specific situation. But I definitely think there's a knowledge there that can really augment a brand or a business's social presence, or even just if we're going to go out and we're going to create properties, or we're going to make content a focus, how do we actually get things like keywords or whatever it might be, get them working properly? Because otherwise you might spend 6 months thinking, God, I've gone down this one track and we're still not ranking for the right thing. It's better to get it all up front.
Yeah.
Use that knowledge, use that insight, and actually, it's I think one of the most undervalued, underutilized skills or professions amongst the brands that I work with, because I think it's just viewed at so separately. It's very rare they're brought together.
Yeah, and it is part of the trinity, isn't it, of social and search is, part of all of that in an ideal world. And I think the other thing to sort of look at those guys is, when I say guys, that they're a specialist and that's what they do, and they spend their whole time, and they can open your eyes to things like Google Plus, for example, whereas maybe a social person from a traditional PR background will say, oh, we might have to look at Google Plus because we can do sort of not massive blog posts. It's a halfway between, say, a blog and Twitter, and that's the reason we do it. Whereas an SEO person will say, well, look at the SEO side of things, and that's where it's becoming almost de rigueur. You need to be part of it just from the search engine side of things. So obviously really critical, and pros and cons both ways, but obviously needs to be part of the kit bag, which leads us to number 4, which is, we're halfway there, the social media specialist with an advertising background. What you thinking there?
Yeah, so I think the thinking on this one is, and I've only had exposure to this after having, for the last sort of 10 or 11 months, worked within an environment that has like an ad agency or a creative team within the building. And you can remember, advertising's so campaign driven, and it's what they're good at, and it's often the brief is, okay, we're launching a new ice cream next month. How do we get more people to know we've got this new ice cream? What do we do? So it's a reach thing, it's a visibility thing, but it's very campaign driven. And I think we touched on it earlier. Social isn't so much. I actually think the term social media campaign is a bit of an oxymoron sometimes, because I don't think you actually can have one. I think, social media is social because people dip in and out of it. They want to have actually relationships, that sort of public relationships. Social is about relationships, and it's about building them over time. And I think someone with an advertising background, and this is their brief, is to create noise or buzz over a sort of very specific period of time, which kind of, in a purist social kind of way, goes against the theory of it. It goes against the actual, what it actually is. Social media is an ongoing, I think, relationship in which you have, certain, you either engage with it or not as you choose to, not when you're told to.
I think the other thing is that it's if you haven't got a presence and you haven't built your community of fans, followers, enthusiasts, advocates for what it is that you do and you stand for, then when you go out, you've got no one to talk to specifically. You have to go and buy that, and there's a need for that. My theory is, the old pyramid and PR and social in its purest sense is that 24/7, 365 days of the year. Building reputation, and reputation is your brand. So PR is actually building your brand, and so you're building that community ongoing. So when you have a new launch or you have a spike, that you've already got a fan base there, and then you have spikes at milestone times or seasonal or whatever. And that's when you can be more probably digitally focused, a bit more campaign focused in that regard. So it's probably, I think there's a bit of confusion as to whether it's actually social or whether it's just a digital campaign that flows into social.
That's right. One of the you've just hit the nail on the head. One of the ways I always talk about it is, imagine, and this sort of comes back to almost the Chris Brogan style of social, is, if you're going to post 10 times over the space of 2 weeks, 9 posts are for your community, 1's for you.
Yep.
I thought that what you should be doing is building, you're almost collecting credits. Okay, the more you add value to the people that follow you, and you can build an audience by adding value to them. Okay, so you develop all these credits with your community. After you've got the credits in the bank, then you can hit them with a campaign message, or then you can hit them with something you want them to do. And that, to me, is often forgotten about because, like you said, someone will say, look, let's launch this campaign. Well, we don't have a fan base. Well, go spend 12, 18 months building a fan base. Once you've done that, then these campaigns will naturally amplify because you've got an engaged group of people who actually want to be advocates for you because you've made the effort to really add a bit of value to them or add value to their day or their lives or whatever it might be. But I think it's a big one and often lost, and often you get, well, we want this to work socially. Well, you can't unless you actually have advocates out there that you've garnered relationships with over a period of time before you hit them with that campaign message.
Oh, well, yeah, it sounds like drag racing there, mate. Mates of yours?
No.
And I guess the other thing is with particularly the big ad agencies, and this is going to be a gross generalisation, so bear with me, but, the dollars are flowing. We only have to look at overseas to see the dollars are flowing into social, and a little bit less being spent in other areas of traditional advertising, for example, and for very good, for obvious reasons. And so is it a blatant play for a revenue grab, or is it, the agency in their heart, they see the ground shifting and they want to passionately and genuinely being part of that? And I reckon, and I'm being a bit cynical there, but I believe you can tell that pretty quickly by looking at what an agency will do, an ad agency, and how they approach it, social media.
Yeah, I completely agree. One of the things I didn't put on the list is, I don't think I did, is sort of media buyers. I'm not sure if that's on that list.
No, I
don't think so.
Looking at it, no. I think it was mentioned somewhere, but
it might have been mentioned somewhere. But media buying, again, it's linked to advertising, obviously. And, I've talked about a lot lately about how Facebook's become a platform for semi-guaranteed engagement. So if you've got the dollars, you can make stuff more visible. I mean, its content still has to be right. But media buyers, again, have an important role to play because, they often have more dollars than anyone else, being media buyers. They'll make a play for social. And a lot of times it'll be very much, almost paid driven. So how do we use paid search? How do we use Facebook ads? How do we use promoted tweets or promoted posts or whatever it might be?
Very, very, very good call. It's a bit like going back to the olden days in terms of PR, and when there was an ad campaign that either PR supported or PR led, but there was campaign dollars in there, advertising dollars, and that enabled you to get more media coverage and more buzz happening because there was media spend somewhere along the line. So your point's a valid one. I think that's a really good point. And obviously, and it's the same in the PR industry, there's PR people who don't want to move into the space. In advertising, the same thing. And in media buying, there are some media strategists out there who are all over this and get it. And then you get those that are still, using whatever system that they use to plan their TV buy, and it's as basic as all basic. So again, within the industry, there's great scope for the savvy strategist and media planner to really come to the fore there and to really be changing their thinking and to be really relevant. So it's a really good point. All right, coming up to number 5, and this is a really interesting one, I reckon. The social media specialist with a direct marketing background. Coming from someone who studied and got a certificate in direct marketing, God, so many years ago, when the DM teams were called stamp lickers. It's changed a lot, but I've never really practiced direct marketing, but I've always been interested in the space, and And now, it's all about data driven. So direct marketing it's more data analytical, isn't it? Walk us through what you're thinking there.
Yeah, again, look, it's not something that I don't have the background you've got, and this is only based on observations of working with people with that background or those kind of agencies, recently. There is that, there's a couple of things. One is focusing on incentive. Now, I often think direct marketers, in order to, and I think sometimes, or I've noticed it actually, a lot of Facebook competitions or activity, you can almost tell have that kind of mindset in place. It's like, okay, we want to increase our Facebook fan base by X because it means we can communicate with more people. So how do we do that? We run a campaign, give them incentive, bring them across. And I think that's classic sort of direct marketing style activity. So I think you see that a lot more in social spaces now. So that's one thing that really sort of, popped into my head when I was writing this. Of data and analytics, and again, this is something that applies across the board. I think they probably have a better handle on it than most because they have to look at things like bounce rates, open rates, especially on the EDM side of things. So you're constantly looking at data. I think one of the big challenges of data is there's so much of it, and make it genuinely useful.
Yeah.
So you've got, if I'm a retailer, I've got shop floor data, I've got sales data, I've got web traffic data, I've got my social channel data, I've got my, my direct marketing. There's all this different data, and I think we've become obsessed with collecting it. I don't know how good we've got at combining it and making it all actionable.
Yeah, good point.
And maybe I just don't have I don't see it at the coalface enough. I don't see all of it. I only sort of see probably web analytics and your social analytics. But we're collecting a lot of this stuff, and big data was the big buzzword of last year, and we all talked about it. But these guys probably have a better handle on, and really help in becoming that that prototype, and that knowledge and using that to making more informed decisions about content or campaigns using the analytics you have available.
They're sort of the dark horse. I guess if you go back a few years and direct marketing was seen as a poor cousin to advertising, yet some of the big agencies, they never beat their chest too much, but they got some pretty big dollars, some of those direct agencies. And I reckon you're probably about right. I reckon there's chunks of them that they're moving into this space really well and can do it. I think there's always again, coming from purists, there's probably a chance to overcook it, overanalyze, lose the passion. I think when you're communicating, participating online, social, on and offline, creating content, I think passion and enthusiasm is number one, because you can't buy that, you can't replicate that, and that gives you a lead anywhere else. If it comes down to analytics, everyone's got the analytics to work from. It becomes a bit more of a level playing field. So I come from the passion school of thought, if there's such a thing. But I think that the second measure is underpinned by analytics where possible, and again, it's going to be dependent on your goals, what you're trying to achieve. Is it thought leadership? Is it whatever? But I think we can all become better at analytics. There's so many tools out there to just even have the wherewithal to spend time on it and know the tools and be that tech background as well. That's going to be an incredible skill, and it's changing and it's morphing. And I do believe that direct DM people, being sort of analytical type of people, will get involved in that. And you raised about the EDM and the email. I mean, the power of social today is, the return of email and how powerful and database driven and all of that, which falls into the direct marketing remit. And I think that's gold. So anyone who's an expert in that space, if they can, an email, if they can start crossing it into social, I think they've got a really big role to play, really big.
And there's probably an argument to say that, with those more mainstream social properties, you are doing a similar thing. You're trying to build an audience so you can market directly to them. But again, like you said, I think the old school direct marketer is very much about pushing a product message or pushing a very message they want you to act, as opposed to tapping into the interests or or building relationships based on the passions and interests of the community. So it's again the two fusing together. But I think, like I said, the ones that have adapted to that or adopted that philosophy are probably going to do very well because they have a lot of inherent skills that will make them succeed.
Exactly. Okay, coming to the home straight. Number 6, the native social media specialists.
Yeah.
These are the people that have found their way into the space. Some good, some bad, some ugly. What's the story there?
Yeah. So it's really hard not to generalise with this, isn't it? And I'm sorry if we are, but this one came out of, you've got a lot of people that maybe studied. They could have studied anything. They could have studied, design at school. They could have studied comms. They could have studied marketing or whatever. But they have, and I'm talking. This is more your younger generation consultant, I think. You've probably grown up with social as second nature. So you've come up, and it's what you've done. So your ability to be technically au fait and also understand the different ways that people engage content or consume content. So if I think about the more traditional content consumer, I think about my parents. My dad starts every day reading Herald Sun, and he won't change. Okay, well, I think there's the more native social person who's a bit younger has grown up with buying a lot, or has grown up with Mashables the first thing in the morning. They've come up at a different time. So what they've been exposed to really just shape the way they behave.
Yeah.
So I think you've got a lot of young community managers who have sort of the technical proficiency, understand how younger people behave online, and therefore can speak in a language or behave in a way that reflects that.
Yeah.
I think that probably the negative is the life experience, the experiences in other parts of life which actually can help with strategic thinking or can help with the red flags or can help with any issues that pop up. Probably not as well versed in handling those situations.
Yep.
You will find, I think, in 5 years, someone who's just done nothing but worked in social media their whole career. They'll be done it since they're 20. Now, you haven't got many people like that at the moment, because it hasn't been around that long. But you will have those people. So this new breed of, social media, especially native.
Yeah.
And I don't know what other skills will point to them, but they'll know how the platforms work. They'll know the first to be across it because they're so ingrained and so on top of the platforms.
Yeah, and for them to go off and then learn other skills is what they're going to need. Otherwise, they'll find themselves, a couple of years down the track, and that role will have morphed and changed and become more sophisticated. I'd also like to add in there, and I know quite a few of them, people that aren't inherently come through a comms background or whatever, but for whatever reason gravitated early to social media.
Yep.
And who are intuitively very, very sound.
Yep.
And it's whether it's like, and I'm not talking younger people necessarily. It's people who are just got life experience, and at a particular level. And maybe it's community management with a little bit of content, because intuitively that's what they might just be good at doing that, writing or whatever. Some of those can be really good, but I think as things get a little sophisticated, particularly in the enterprise, those people, they might never get those jobs, but if they do, they might need to start adding some strings to their bow. But, there's some people out there who are really, really good at what they do in that space. Whether they can take it to the next levels, they might not never need to. But for smaller businesses and things like that, they can do better than people in marketing and advertising and PR. So they do exist.
Yeah, exactly.
The goal is to find them. And finally, we have, drum roll, this beast, this mythical beast, my friend, this mythical beast, the integrated social media specialist. Where do we find such a beast?
Yeah, look, I think, and I've chatted to a few people. I think a lot of my peers and the people that I, respect, all really would like to at some point be able to say, look, I'm not going to be a specialist at each of the things we've just discussed, but I'll have a good appreciation to help inform my decision making and make me a better consultant, make me a better business advisor, make me a better operator, because I can understand the pros and cons of each, the implications of each, or making them all work together. I think you and I come from a comms background. I've worked really hard over the last sort of 6-7 years to understand all those other bits a lot better, because they all have a role to play. I think at the start we touched on this. It does come down a lot, I think, to personal development, how badly you want to be proficient in all those areas, and how much you respect them and value them. There are some people, though. I mean, there's some people, net marketers, and I can think of a few of them that, you know, from the early 2000s have operated in the online space and just inherently had all those bits in their pocket anyway, because that's what they did. They were internet marketers, and I've searched, they understood the role of design, understood the role of your digital footprint. And I don't think there's many of those people that I can only think of a couple off my head, off the top of my head. They're the ones that, you know, there's not many of them around, but they are able to, because they can look at it from all angles. And I just think that as time goes forward, they're the kind of people that are going to be at the top of organisations really making the big decisions, because they know each bit and they know the impact each bit will have, but there's not many of them around. And
so that's more from us. They join the dots, they see the bigger picture, they're quite strategic, maybe pragmatic in a number of areas,
yep.
And then know enough to bring people in for certain areas.
Or have the knowledge to know that, hey, I know I need to bring that specialist in now.
Yeah.
Or I need to bring that person out, because I may know it to a point, but I don't know it to the next point. It's time to bring them in. I think it's almost recognising limitations as much as recognising your own skill set. Yeah, and I do think it's almost a mythical type goal to think you can be that proficient in all those areas, but having an understanding, knowing the basic roles of each, constantly understanding the developments in each of those areas. So, you know, search is a great example. Search changes every day because Google changes their algorithm every day.
And they're people that's all they do.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all they do. So how can you ever compete with them?
Impossibly.
You
exactly.
Can't.
Exactly. And I think that's why I think it's impossible to be the perfect social media consultant or specialist, because there's just too much knowledge, and there's no way you can store all that in your head.
No. But I think somewhere along the line, if you're an operator in that space, you will come out of it from a particular angle, which is very fair, and you will have a philosophy. I think if you're dealing with a social media consultant who hasn't got a philosophy on where things are going, have an opinion, whether it's right or wrong, but to be able to take it to the next level in terms of their thinking, you know, that's what you're looking for. There's no right or wrong necessarily.
No, there isn't.
And anyone who says that they're an expert in everything, they're not. So that's a bit of a red flag. But I think you do want people who have a philosophy or a stream of consciousness down one particular path, and that's where they concentrate, while at the same time being respectful across all the elements and knowing what they don't know. Yeah,
I think respectful is the key bit. I think a lot of times, and Facebook probably brings this to life for me more than any case. So everyone's got a Facebook page. Anyone can access Facebook Insights whenever they want. Anyone can consider themselves a quite polished social media participant, but that doesn't mean you really understand how social works or how it works more broadly. And I think, you know, what things like Facebook and Twitter have made social part of the mainstream. But I just don't think we can lose respect for all the knowledge and the skills that the people from all these backgrounds have. And I think each of them has a really important role to play. And I may continue, because I think that's what's going to allow us to evolve. And I think that's what keeps me interested in the space, is because you never know everything. You're never going to. So it's always going to keep you quite switched on. And I think that's what's so dynamic and fun to be part of it. But being respectful for everyone in each of those from those backgrounds is really important, because it can make you, I think, a better consultant organisations you work with.
Absolutely, I agree. Well, on that note, my friend, I better leave you to it so you can get back out into the surf.
Yep.
And enjoy the rest of your holiday. It's been great chatting, and I think what we all agree that there is a beast out there, a mythical beast called the integrated social media specialist.
Yeah. And there may be a for around, but not for a while yet. We'll see what happens.
Indeed. Okay, buddy. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Trev. Cheers, buddy.